Thanks for joining us in the Florida Today newsroom. I'm Matt Reed, and today we're talking news, politics, and even a little bit of sports with my friend Bill Mick, host of Bill Mick Live on WMMBAM 1240, 1350 in North Brevard. Bill, thanks for joining us. Let's talk first about something you've been hot on all week, and that is the issue of guns on the campus of Eastern Florida State College. There was a shooting, apparently self-defense, stemmed from a fight about 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago tomorrow.
And a group called Florida Carry has sued for some reason. Bring us up to speed.
Well, the shooting happened 2 Thursdays ago. It was a student of the school who'd arrived on campus to find 2 non-students were there, and there was a confrontation. Apparently they'd been friends in some type of association previously that had turned sour. These 2 off-campus kids, and I say kids, they're in their early 20s, attacked this 24-year-old student. He made it to his car where he had a gun, and with one shot, he stopped the attack. They were attacking him with a pool cue. Translation, dangerous and deadly weapon.
Right.
Pool cue was broken in half when it was recovered by law enforcement. Was it being used as a stabbing weapon, a bludgeoning weapon? Doesn't matter. Either's going to kill you. So this kid goes back to his car, gets the gun, fires one shot into one of the assailants. The assault stops. It's done. It's over. Next day, reported in the headline of Florida Today, is this student may be disciplined for having the firearm. About 2 weeks before that, there'd been a first appeals court ruling in Florida saying that the law is written in Florida that says
It's a very big deal.
You may have guns in your car, even on a college campus parking lot, even though most of the college campuses in the state had prohibited having a gun on campus at all, period. It wasn't compliant with the state law. It had been appealed, and the appeals court says, no, that's the law, and they can have a gun in the car. Eastern Florida State had not yet changed its policy. Their spokesman, John Glish, who used to work here, had said they were waiting to see that the appeals process was done before they changed the policy and might have had to change it again. Florida Carry assumed ground they should not have assumed here in filing this suit the Monday after the incident.
Yeah, I didn't see that there was any indication that they weren't complying with the new policy. In fact, this young man had a gun in his car, right, which was what the courts say you have to allow now. Were they concerned that he might be disciplined in some way, that he might be suspended or expelled from school because he had violated the school policy? Is that what it was?
That's not what they said, at least in the release that I saw. What they said was they were taking this course of action on because of students or others on the Eastern Florida State campus that were members of their organization who remained unnamed because they feared retaliation. Bottom line is, this group inserted itself into a battle it didn't need to insert itself in. Eastern Florida State, with remarkable speed for an institution, had this policy under review and about to be changed within a week. Now, 2 weeks out, the policy has been changed. There's no cause for a lawsuit. Florida Carry is making us gun rights folks look bad by looking like you're looking to sue at the drop of a hat. At the very most, they should have had a discussion with Eastern Florida State before they thought about filing the lawsuit. That was ridiculous. Now, what brought the suit on? John Glish, in the original comments to the reporters as they covered the story, was our policy is going to stay the same. Not the right comment to make at that time. Comment should have been, we're reviewing the policy and we'll make changes as appropriate. Might have averted the lawsuit at that point. I think they overreacted to what John Glish said in the heat of the moment after the shooting. Let's have calmer heads prevail, and let's not make gun rights folks look like idiots by filing lawsuits where they have no claim here. They're wanting monetary damages the way I read the suit. They're not entitled to anything here. That's ridiculous. And they need to go away, shut up, and be quiet for a while, and maybe have some credibility the next time they surface on an issue. I think Florida Carry harmed itself here very badly.
They may not have had a cause either, because there hadn't been any action taken against the person in this case who had defended himself with a gun.
Matter of fact, less than a week later, Eastern Florida State comes out after they do their internal investigation. They find out what they can through their connections with law enforcement who investigated the incident on their campus, and they said, look, based on what we've learned, based on what we know, this student is welcome back on our campus. We want him back as soon as he feels like being here. They would not have done so if they felt he was the bad guy or the instigator in this situation. He acted in accordance with law. You had a lawfully armed citizen defend himself from a felonious attack, and that's all you had here. And I'm pretty sure through their law enforcement connections, Jack Parker runs security at Eastern Florida State. Pretty sure he's in tune with the folks at Palm Bay PD. He knows what happened here. They wouldn't have made that decision without knowledge that their student was clear in this incident.
One of the things that I'm watching is in the news is Florida Carry has pressed another lawsuit hot on the heels of this ruling that they need to allow students to keep firearms in the cars if they legally can do that. Florida Carry has sued the University of Florida and wants the University of Florida to allow guns in any university-owned property. Could be,
you mean beyond what the law says with the guns in the cars?
Yeah, what they're suing now in Gainesville to do is to allow students to carry their firearms into classrooms, to keep guns in fraternity houses, to have them any place that is university-owned property. What do you make of that? Is it possible to overreach?
It is, and I think maybe they are, but if you're talking about a student residence, whether it's a dormitory or an off-campus apartment or even an on-campus apartment as far as that goes, that student should have the right to protect himself from attacks. And let's not pretend that felonious attacks don't happen on college campuses. You see rapes, you see assaults, you see, sadly, murders from time to time. Thank God it's not very often. But the ability to protect yourself as a lawfully armed citizen, I think is important. But I think Florida Carry needs to have a discussion with these schools and sit down and have some dialogue about what's reasonable in those circumstances. And if you're going around suing everybody at a drop of a hat, I think you lose credibility for your position on the issues, when they could be a very viable advocate for something that's probably necessary, but there's a discussion to be had.
The part of the lawsuit, the ruling on the first gun issue that stands out to me is the judge saying this is an issue for the legislature to decide. Mm-hmm. If the legislature wants to include universities on that list of places where you cannot carry a firearm, courthouses, for example.
Post offices.
Schools, then that's up to the legislature to decide. Our legislature is pretty conservative. They seem to pass gun bills pretty quickly when gun people want them. On the other hand, it is a political decision. It's hard to imagine a lot of Floridians being comfortable with the idea of sending their kids to a dorm. It's still their children. Many people don't choose to carry, feeling comfortable with that situation. Politically, it just seems like a tough road.
It could be a very tough discussion to have politically, but I think it's one worthy of having. If you take a look at the Virginia Tech shooting a couple of years ago, take a look at what happened at Columbine and Sandy Hook, a lawfully armed citizen could have stopped those situations of carnage from being what they were. Could have been much less with the right person with the right firearm. And I think the Eastern Florida State situation is a great example of that. One shot, that attack was over. It was done. And this kid could have been in the hospital. Instead, he's ready to go back to school. At least we hope so.
Let's talk about Cocoa Beach. Lots of things going on in Cocoa Beach right now. I think it might have been about a year ago that Cocoa Beach talked about coming up with its zoning rules and things for pot dispensaries. At that time, the medical marijuana law hadn't even made it onto the ballot as a proposal. Now it looks like it might have the support it needs to pass, and Cocoa Beach looks visionary in some fashion.
They do. They do.
What do you make of what Cocoa Beach is doing?
Well, now that the medical marijuana initiative is going to be on the ballot to be a constitutional amendment in the state, number one, got a big problem with it being on the Constitution. This, again, is a legislative issue, like you were talking about with the guns. Should be handled in the legislature, but with the system we have in Florida, we're legislating by constitutional amendment. It's going to be on the ballot in November. I think Cocoa Beach is ahead to start having this discussion now. And they're concerned about the image of the city, about the tourism impact it's going to have. What kind of tourism do you want in Cocoa Beach? They're not a spring break town. They don't necessarily want to be a spring break town. They are not as tourist friendly as I would like them to be in most cases. And I think this is a wise concern for them to take. How many medical marijuana dispensaries do you need? Is it going to be the downtown pot store, and is there going to be one on every corner? I think they don't want that. I think it hurts their image if they do. I think it's a wise and viable discussion, given that the amendment could pass.
I talked to Mayor Dave Netterstrom recently. He talked about this as being an issue like you would have with pain clinics. If it's truly medical marijuana, then it needs to be zoned and handled in a way that is appropriate for a medical type of substance. I could foresee even having it be part of what you would find in your local CVS or Walgreens pharmacy.
CVS has some room now that they're getting rid of cigarettes. So there you go.
But the idea that that you would have marijuana being sold in any what is now like head shops or skateboard shops or surf shops right now seems like it is a little bit out of step and a little bit beyond what people were hoping for.
Not the image you want for your beach community if you're trying to be a family-friendly vacation destination.
Leave that for Daytona Beach, right?
Exactly.
Well, Cocoa Beach has surfing going on. It's got the kayaking and the nature and space.
Mm-hmm,
Maybe not space cowboys
That's
for
true.
their things. The other thing that Cocoa Beach just did, and I know this was probably warms your heart, is voted to dismantle and get rid of its red light camera system.
Bigger than warming my heart, it's an admission of what I've been saying for years, that this red light camera scam is just a revenue grab, and that's all it is. In the first story Florida Today reported about the potential for doing away with red light cameras in Cocoa Beach, Mayor Dave Netterstrom cited that over the last year, some 4,800 tickets resulted in fines of over $640,000 or $50,000, and of that, the city only saw about 40,000.
Right.
That they got the bad name and everybody else got the
Money.
benefit.
Right.
Benefit. So that's what they saw these as, was a revenue generator. They found out it's not the revenue generator they thought it was. They're bearing the brunt. Everybody else is getting the money. This is a financial thing. This is not a safety thing. And I'm glad they're taking the step. Again, it goes back to them wanting to appear to be more tourist friendly. And I think Cocoa Beach needs that image redo. I think they need to brush up the image and say we are friendly and we're not trying to hound you for every ticket we can. The other thing that they smartly avoided, and I brought this up as we talked this issue on the show this week, was remember when they did the parking meters with the pay by smartphone?
Right.
Where it was going to be confusing to anybody who pulled up to do it. They voted that one down, thank goodness, because that would have been another anti-tourism thing on their belt.
That's just confusing.
Yeah, it was, absolutely. So I think this is smart for Cocoa Beach. I'm glad to see them warming up to the idea of tourism. I hope they continue in that fashion. I think these are good moves in that regard.
Well, when they looked at the numbers, accidents had reduced some.
Mm-hmm.
If you looked at just the percentages, it would look like a lot, but the round numbers of wrecks that they, prevented or the amount by which they had dropped really weren't that many. It's not like we're going to have carnage galore by taking away
They weren't
these.
dealing with a lot of accidents to start with. So when you don't have a problem, this was a solution to a problem that didn't exist.
Right.
You're going to have accidents. If you have traffic, that's going to happen. But they found a solution to a non-existent problem. I'm glad they're doing away with it. It's a smart move. Question is, can they negotiate out of it? Because that contract goes through 2015. And to get out of it early, I'm sure they're going to have to pay some kind of penalty to the company in Arizona that mans and provides the cameras.
What I recommended to Dave Netterstrom, the mayor, was, if they ever come to you with a pitch again to install these cameras, ask them to do the study about where they should put the cameras to reduce wrecks caused by red light running.
Absolutely.
If you look at where these consultants say they're going to put their cameras, and cities usually don't consider putting them in unless somebody comes and pitches it to them, it's never in any place where they've actually found a high rate of red light running accidents. They usually put them in at the busiest intersections, letting people infer that it's going to improve safety, but it's really just there to flag the most people with the highest number of tickets and make the most money.
Absolutely. They always go to the high traffic areas, not necessarily those that are dangerous.
Another issue that's come up in the past week, I thought there was some interesting economics behind it. The ban on CVS's decision, the drugstore chain, decision to get rid of tobacco sales up front. What do you make of that?
I think it's a good PR move if you're wanting to be known as a health industry related services provider. I thought your column on Sunday was really good at looking at the insights of this because it's things that I hadn't looked at. My concern was, are they consistent in what they're saying? If you're going to do away with cigarette sales in this drugstore, are you going to do away with alcohol sales too? I mean, it has its problems. You can't tell me that's a healthy product either. So how consistent are you going to be? That remains to be seen. I don't look for them to do away with alcohol sales. But my question for you would be, what are they going to do in those stores instead? How do they replace that revenue?
We're talking about $2 billion. And a company like CVS Caremark doesn't willingly part with $2 billion unless they know they're going to make it up elsewhere. Now, what I understand they're going to do is they're expanding their walk-in clinics. They're expanding their brand as your corner affordable healthcare service provider. Under Obamacare, preventive care is free. Remember that. And what this chain is trying to do is connect with hospitals and doctors groups that are forming these accountable care organizations in which they get paid to keep people healthy and not treat them or bill them for every discussion or treatment or procedure. So getting in on that.
So come and see your doctor with us,
It's a
and
lot
if you
of
need
money.
something, we've got it here.
Meanwhile, there's
Not a bad
another
idea.
big thing that I think is going on here. There is vast pent-up demand among frightened consumers who are now increasingly on these high-deductible health plans for any kind of pricing information, any sort of value they can find, and CVS offers that. You can see that it charges a flat rate of $79 to go see a nurse practitioner or physician's assistant. Got a jellyfish sting, that's where you can go. Need a flu shot, that's where you can go. A rash, a cut, those kinds of things. You can go to a place like that and you know how much you're going to pay. Take that same problem to a hospital or your doctor's office, you have no idea what you're going to pay. It can wipe you out. So there is a big pent-up demand for a shrewd company that positions itself with some disclosure and positions itself as your friendly neighborhood healthcare store.
Is this the market finding its own place in the wake of this new law? I mean, it kind of sounds that way to me.
I think it could. I think it really could. Now keep in mind, the biggest change is this shift to, for consumers, is this big shift to high deductible health plans. Biggest type of plans sold on the Obamacare exchanges, but have been around, connected to these tax-free accounts since the 1990s when Republicans created them as a reaction to Hillary Care, right? Well, now that we are under pressure to be more discerning consumers, we got to find the best deals for ourselves, and they're really hard to find because no one will disclose what they charge.
Could be the hidden silver lining to Obamacare, maybe.
Let's talk about another issue in the news.
Okay.
We now have our first openly gay college football player entering the NFL draft. There have been players who have come out after their careers in the NFL. This is the first person to be openly gay going in. What kind of reaction do you think he's going to get?
From the left and from the LGBT crowd, there are going to be praises and accolades and good for them. My reaction as a sports fan is, who cares? Can you play linebacker, defensive end, whatever it is you play? Can you play the position? Can you play it well enough to succeed in the NFL? If equal rights and gay rights are supposed to be about equality and being treated the same, why is this an issue? Do we interview other college players? How many girls did you have in your dorm last year? It's ridiculous. It is, let's be honest about the debate. This is about advancing the gay agenda. It's about this guy getting some notoriety for himself ahead of the draft. He's hoping it advances his draft pick, but several teams in the NFL have already come out and said, you know what? This is going to take his draft status down maybe a couple of levels in the draft, a couple of rounds. He's projected to be a 3rd or 4th round pick. They're saying now might be 5th or 6th because the NFL locker room, they are acknowledging, is not a place that is ready for an openly gay athlete in that environment. And let's be honest, this is football. That locker room is not a politically correct place. There's language flying around there. There are racial epithets flying around there. There are sexual jokes flying around there on a regular basis. It's locker room humor. And if you're not a big enough boy to handle it, boy, did you just start something for yourself. Take a look at the Miami Dolphins from last season.
We were just talking about this maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah.
About what a rough and tumble, sometimes cruel place locker rooms can be. Are they bullies? I don't know. I was struck
You're an NFL lineman. How can you be bullied? Of course not.
Of all people, it was Richie Incognito, the so-called culprit in that case, who tweeted out that he had respect for this player, Michael Sam, a defensive end from Missouri, and good luck, which I kind of interpreted to mean it's okay to be openly gay in the NFL. Just don't be a wuss, right?
Exactly.
This is a business full of tough guys. This guy's a tough guy. He can play. I think if people from the left are expecting this guy to be a loud advocate and champion for their cause and still fit in to the NFL, I think we've seen that maybe that's where things could be a problem.
Well, he has made himself their champion, whether that was his intent or not. And the question is, how does he handle it once he's drafted and once he's on a team, once he's in the locker room? Bottom line is, on the field, the NFL teams aren't going to care what he does in his bedroom. They don't care what these players do as far as drugs, sex life, or anything else, as long as on Sunday they're performing as expected and doing the job of, knocking the quarterback's head off or tackling the runner, whatever it may be. This guy has set himself up to be noticed in his career. He will probably see some advertising dollars from certain groups or certain products that are targeting that particular community. He may have set himself up for some endorsements. There's a whole vast array of things to think about here. What he's done, he's made himself a poster child for the LGBT cause. And let's be honest, it's the NFL. It's about football. It's about winning, and it's about money at the end of it. And he's cost himself some money by dropping down probably a round or two in the draft, because these NFL teams saying, you know what? Our locker room's not ready for that. We don't need the heat of that discussion being around our team. We're about football. We're not about these social issues.
I think if he can do anything to be a champion for his cause, it'd be just to show he's a normal guy who can play.
That's what he needs to do. He needs to shut up and play football. We'll see if that happens.
Finally, we've just got about 5 minutes left here. Bill, let's talk a little bit about politics going into this thing. I hate to keep coming back to the pot issue, but recently some polling numbers suggested that medical marijuana is getting some serious support in Florida, in part because a new wave of baby boomers are coming into politics. They're becoming a bigger part of the electorate. They're much more liberal on some social issues like medical marijuana than the people that they are replacing as super voters. What do you make of that?
When we talked about this on my show a couple of weeks ago, or last week, I guess, it kind of surprised me when I read your column about the people in Brevard who'd actually signed the petition, being some of the senior voters, some of the 50, 55 plus voters that are saying, yeah, I'm going to sign for that to go on the ballot. Number one, it concerns me that they don't understand what a constitutional issue is. And yeah, we let these people vote. Number two, that would seem to indicate support for the measure. If that's the case, it would surprise me if this measure passes in Florida. My perception is we are a much more conservative state than that. As a former drug cop, if this were truly a medical marijuana measure about getting medicine in the hands of people who are terminally ill or can somehow benefit from the use of this drug, then I'm all for it. But let's do it through the legislative process, and let's dispense it through a pharmacy. If we're talking about a drug that helps people when they're sick, dispense it per normal route. This is about corner marijuana stores, and Cocoa Beach is right to be taking it up on their issue, and I think the voters are right to be concerned about what this bill actually says and what it does. You need to go read the language of the amendment, not the summary language that's going to be on the ballot, because there will be two different things. And while the Supreme Court's approved the summary language and saying it's not deceptive, I think you really need to understand the full amendment before you cast a vote. And if it passes, I think we're opening up a can of worms in the state of Florida.
It looked like there were people that not just baby boomers, but even some people that were a little bit older than that, who were conservative in every other way. Republicans, well-educated people with high incomes, that seemed to be supporting this measure, 70 to 80%, and did see it primarily as a medical issue, seeing it mainly as, hey, this is something that's out there. Maybe I want that for myself as an option as I get more concerned about my own aches and pains and concerns in life. If you look at support for legalization, support is far lower. It's still split.
And that's why I think the pro-marijuana crowd, and not medical marijuana, the pro-marijuana crowd that's really behind this initiative, they're just trying to legalize marijuana in any fashion that they can. The medical path is the easiest path to make that happen, and it very well could happen here. That's why the ballot language, not the ballot language, the amendment language itself is so important. Does it open up a can of worms, and is this opening up your corner marijuana store? And I've got a problem with that.
I think they understand that if you legalize this and people use it for medical purposes, the posture of law enforcement and everyone else sort of relaxes some.
Sure.
People get to know other people who are smoking this for their medical reasons, and then see that they're not, pitching bombs into the city hall or shooting each other and robbing banks because they're doing it. And again, it becomes more normalized. as they go on.
We're having a health party Friday night. Yeah, okay.
Well, I think on a bigger scale, though, it seems like we're beginning to see a wave of voters who are conservative in some ways, but socially more libertarian. And it raises a question to me, which party do they find a home in? Then if you've got one party that has traditionally been socially and fiscally and government, wise conservative on one hand with the Republicans, and then on the other side you've got social freedom but big government with the Democrats.
I think the battle inside the Republican Party right now that we've been talking about for a few years is just what you're talking about. We want fiscal conservatism. We want the government entities that are playing with our tax dollars to be responsible and spend those dollars wisely and not overspend. It's one of the biggest gripes I've had in my radio career is that when Republicans get in charge and they get elected, they start spending money like they're drunken Democrats. No, we need to act like we believe and own the principles we claim to hold when we run for office. On the other hand, freedom comes with responsibility. And if we're going to advocate for that freedom, we also need to advocate for that responsibility as well. I think you're going to find a home in the Republican Party as younger Republicans come into the fold, that they are going to start changing the policies in the Republican Party so they're not harping on social issues all the time. Their idea is about keeping government under control because it's out of control government that's hurting this country right now. And let your social issues happen and you advocate for what you want, but it's not going to be part of the party platform. Just had a candidate come to me the other day and ask, what about instead of running as a Republican or a Democrat, I run as an MPA? I said, if it's about your message, that's fine. You'll get the message out. But you better be in a party if you think you're going to win. And right now, you better find one of the two.
I think the libertarians within the Republican Party were smart to be among the first to realize that they needed to work from within the party.
Absolutely.
I think on the left, there's probably great potential for somebody coming from that more fiscally cautious Clinton wing. We'll see if either one of these big parties learn here in the next 4 years to come.
It's going to be a fun year as these elections come about. It'll be good to watch.
Bill Mick, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you, Matt.